We live in a generation which is so cultivated to its core to progress, to evolve, to create, and to even destroy, to a level which our comprehension makes it so difficult for us to follow. There was a time when we had a concept of flying like birds until it was possible, and now it feels so normal. When we talk about flying, from flying in air to orbiting in space, we have always reached levels beyond our comprehension at the time and made them normal. Today, I had the opportunity to have a conversation with someone who built a computer before Bill Gates even created Microsoft. Someone who worked on simulation platforms for F-15 and is still curious on what else he can build. Curiosity sometimes has no limit, no age, no gender. Either you're curious or you're not. And our guest today is a curious one. You're watching The Daily Scoop, and I'm your host, Faizan Ali. Thank you so much for joining us, Ken. It's a pleasure to have you on the show, and quite a remarkable background you have with a lot of expertise, a lot of experience, and I hope a lot to learn from you. Before we get into the conversation, uh, there has been a lot of development in the field that you are in right now, especially when it comes to DeepSeek and ChatGPT and all that. What is your take on the whole scenario?
Well, I think it's going to be interesting to watch it play out. When we look at the evolution of AI, I think it's probably the let's say that maybe the most important development since we developed the personal computer, because it's going to have transformational effects across so many different aspects of business. You know, I started working with AI. Well, it was GPT 2.0 was when I started. That's how far back I go. And what I would say is that watching it change and watching it evolve has been very interesting. And then looking at use applications, I get ads all the time now from people that are developing specialized versions using either chat or one of the other AI engines. And what they're doing is they're creating agents. I saw a proposal, somebody's trying to sell them to me, but I wasn't in a position I wanted to deal with it right now. But they actually they have software that creates bots that are like an HR bot for a company and a receptionist bot and all of these different bots that are very specially trained to fill in one role. And so that then makes it very easy for a small company to appear much larger. And it starts to it gives companies the ability to run leaner, which is going to obviously affect, we talked in the notes a little bit about affecting employment, but it's also going to free up people to grow their skill set and move it, up and beyond being, somebody that just answers a phone, perhaps.
Yeah. I don't want to dilute the importance of your experience by giving a number to your experience. So it's I would appreciate if you can actually give a little bit of a brief on your industrial experience in AI and technology in general and what inspired you so that we are fully capable of understanding where your perspective is coming from.
Well, it's interesting because I got my start in the Air Force. I learned to work on mainframe computers, and this would have been back in the late '60s. You know, I like to say I built my first computer before Bill Gates had an operating system. As back then they ran on a program or an operating system called CPM. It was control process for microprocessors. And it was pretty slick, then Bill Gates bought an operating system. He had Microsoft Word at about that same time frame. But then he bought an operating system that became MS-DOS and now is Windows 11. So I've had a chance to be in computers for multiple decades. It seems like eons at times. And I've always had, since I built my first computer, I've always had at least one computer in my house. Right now, there's probably 4 operational computers and pieces of a bunch of others. My wife has a laptop she uses. I have a laptop I use for travel, and we have a backup laptop. That doesn't count tablets and all of the other devices. So you could say that I am very much a techie. And at my age, because I'm over 70 years old, a lot of people think that, I wouldn't have that expertise and that experience. I have a lot of friends that can't even operate their phone. And yet it's just because of where I've been and what I've done. And like I said, I had a friend, he and I were we had a podcast together, and we were talking about things associated with the office equipment industry, and especially a new form of billing. We called it flat rate. We both still believe that that's the best billing mechanism, where a customer is like an all you can eat. It's kind of like a subscription service rather than a per use service. And anyway, we started seeing some things coming in about AI, and so we had a guest on and did an interview with somebody that was getting started in AI, and that caused both of us to dive into it. Now he took off, and he runs a firm that does AI consulting, and I stayed doing what I was doing, and I was busy and didn't have the time and energy to get fully invested in AI. But I started working with it and started learning what it could do. And I use AI, when I'm at my desk, I use AI probably on a multi times per hour basis, doing something. I have an AI tool that I use with LinkedIn that helps. It doesn't automate the posting, but it creates the contents and provides more insight than I could off the top of my head, which gives me a little bit more efficiency. I wrote a book based on some lectures that I had given over, probably 4 years at that time, because I taught a class on how to fix or how to manage copier technicians. It wasn't about fixing equipment, but it was about teaching new service managers how to fix people, because they knew how to fix equipment. It was fixing the people part. And so what I did was I took all of those lectures and I ran through one AI, which gave me a transcript of it. And then I gave all of those transcripts for all of the many lectures I'd given, fed it into AI and told it how I wanted it to organize it. And in 2 weeks, I had a book published. I couldn't do that without AI. Just going through and trying to analyze all of it would have taken me months, maybe years. A lot of people spend years writing a book. Yeah. I currently have 3 other books in process. I use it to create courseware. I give you an example. There's a program called InVideo I use that I can tell it what kind of a video I want. Actually, I usually have chat write a script for me. I feed the script into InVideo, and then InVideo will pull like video clips from different places and put them together. It can speak my voice, because I trained it on my voice. It'll either find songs it likes or create music. And I can get a 2-minute video out in about 4 or 5 minutes. And if I had to go find the clips and build all of that together, it doesn't become feasible. So there's just so many ways. And I guess that's my biggest use of it, is it improves my efficiency. I still oversee everything it puts out. It's like, when it helped me put the book together, I went back through and read all of it. Some things I went back in and said, hey, I need some more information. Find me a case study. And again, it could go find a case study on the internet about a particular aspect of what I was working on much faster than I could. I could have done it, but instead of taking 15 or 20 minutes to find a good one, it found me 2 or 3 in like a minute. So it is, and again, that's, to me, that is the amazing feature of AI, is the way it can prove efficiencies of individuals. Then we can always look and think about blending AI with robotics, and that then becomes a whole new chapter, because a robotic employee can work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for the same expense that it would work for 1 hour a day. So that makes it very efficient. And, the speed at which AI can process data becomes very useful. For example, I saw just a little clip about a robot they're using now at Amazon that's like 5 or 6 times faster than humans. And I mean, it's not like it's just, something that sits still, but I mean, it goes around, gathers product and puts them and gets them ready to ship and ships, and 3 to 5 times as fast as a human. That's going to displace human jobs. There's no question about it. But
before we
also
dive deeper into robotics, because you touched a little bit about employment just now, there's a lot of controversy when it comes to AI taking over jobs and whatnot. And this is something that I feel like the controversy comes from fear. Because a lot of people, they are afraid. There are a lot of false narratives that are being built up just to get that job security, or maybe financial security, in a way that, like what you were talking about, how you use AI in trying to do your daily routine menial jobs that you wouldn't want to spend a lot of time in. So when it comes to designers, let's say like even editors, like video editors, or maybe photograph editors or animators, people like that, they have a little bit of fear that AI is going to take over their jobs. And that is one of the reasons why they create some sort of a controversy that you get what you pay for. So if you pay for a software which is free, or an AI which is free, or cost, let's say, less than $5, and then an editor or an animator is charging you $500 for the same job, why would you pick an animator? So they say that, like, there's a big difference, because the like the kind of quality you can get from a hands-on job you will never get from an AI, or things like this. Even though there is some fact to it, but I personally feel like there's the conspiracy comes from fear. And you can see that in a lot of jobs, uh, job scopes that you will see out there. Like, a lot of them, they fear that AI is going to take over the world. But when I see it, I see that, like, AI has been there for centuries. Like, since we had even a simplest processor, we had AI. But it has evolved. It has evolved to a stage that now we can say that, like, a lot of jobs which we thought were extremely important has become normal. They're not so drastic, or that you need such an expert to do that specific job. So maybe it's a process that we have to go through to enhance ourselves to be better than the AI, so that we are one step ahead. But I feel like now, in the modern technology, the AI is just moving so fast that it is becoming a little bit more difficult for humans to process it, to be one step ahead.
Okay, I'm going to address that from several levels, because if we go back to the Industrial Revolution, and we started mechanizing, weaving machines, and all of these things throughout history, man has developed technological advances, and what it did is it caused a, let's say, short-term transition in the workforce. In other words, there were people that were displaced, and I think that's going to happen with AI. I think we're already starting to see it happen. But at the same time, I'll go to, you talked about the illustrators. So what that means is they need to change their skill set a little bit and learn to prompt AI. Because somebody that really knows how to prompt AI and who can see the picture in their mind and describe it to the AI in language the AI understands just becomes very, very more productive, greatly increases their productivity. So for the people that have skills, it's not going to be nearly the impact as it is for people that lack any skills, that are doing the jobs maybe not so much in the factory. No, I'm going to say even in the factories, because Tesla uses a bunch of robots in their factories to improve productivity. So in those cases, yeah, it means somebody's going to have to learn a new job skill. But it doesn't necessarily mean that job skill is going to be less valuable. They really probably have the opportunity to learn a skill that's going to be more valuable to them. But they have to be willing to say, hey, okay, I'm going to have to deal with a little uncertainty, and I'm going to have to make myself better. It's interesting. I'm back, and I teach managers this today when I teach my management class, is, if somebody comes up and wants a raise, the question that you ask them is, what have you done to make yourself more valuable to your company? And for people that are always working on making themselves more valuable, they are the people that are probably fairly secure. For the people that are content to just stay where they are, and I use the analogy of putting a bolt in a hole putting a nut on a tire on a car, and they do that for 40 years, that mentality of just, I'm content here, is going to be at risk in some industries. Not all industries. There are some that AI is probably will be, I won't say it'll never be good at, but it'll take longer to become proficient at it, just because I think it's maybe more about training the machine, trying to get it to understand how to do what we're talking about, those kinds of things. Like I said, it's been an interesting ride so far, and I'm really loving it. We go back and talk about AI being here for a while. We can go back to thinking about spell correct, in Word. When that came in, that was a great tool. It didn't get rid of anybody, but it made everybody more productive. I started using Grammarly when it first came out, because it could check my grammar and spelling and do it faster and more accurately than I could, even though it is a little comma heavy. It likes commas in places that they're not needed necessarily.
I
But
think it's a really good point because right now, even in our phones, like right now, I'm using S24 Ultra, and I also have an iPhone, and I'm always comparing between Samsung and iPhone, which one has a better predictive text. And it's a big thing that we use right now because a lot of us are multitasking these days. Like I'm talking to you, and a lot of times I'm texting as well, or occasionally, like when I'm having a podcast and some of my guests they talk about something which I don't know, and I want to Google it straight away so that I can keep up with the conversation. So without even looking, I'm trying to text so that like at least the page comes in front of me so that I can just see like, oh, okay, so he's talking about this. So predictive text is a big tool that we use right now, and how important it is, and how much emphasis new phones, new companies, whenever they release a product, they share like how much they have improved on predictive text is a big thing, even though like it started off like decades ago. So it's a really good point.
Well, and it's interesting. Predictive text is one of those things I'm not a huge fan of because I'm pretty fat fingered. These big fat fingers don't work well on my keyboard on the phone. And so I send people texts that have very strange words in them, a word that just doesn't fit in the sentence. And you're like, and I'm like you, I'll be doing something, I'm texting, and I don't ever read it. I just hit the send button, because it needs to be what I want, and it's not. And people send me back question marks, and I look at the sentence, oh, this word instead. And that's going to be a problem even with AI. And they're starting to build AI into phones. In fact, I noticed I can get a Gemini on my phone. I can get ChatGPT on my phone. Apple Intelligence is going to be available on your iPhone. And again, they're going to make us more powerful, more productive in the long term. They're going to be again, it's not my favorite tool to work on in my phone. Like I said, for lots of reasons, I like to work on a real keyboard. This is my tool, because I know where all the keys are. I could type right here, be talking and typing and not have to worry about it. My phone is like there. But it is, they said they're just going to start to make us more productive. A good example on your phone is your predictive text is going to get better. Your ability to search. In fact, it was really interesting. I saw a demo on ChatGPT. I'm trying to think. Oh, I work with a guy. I follow a guy, and he is in the travel. He works in the travel space, but he came from Google and Facebook. That was his background, and he is one of the people that are alpha testers for companies like ChatGPT and or OpenAI and Google, and so he tests these before the public gets a chance to see it. And it is amazing, again, the things. He showed a demo one day. He was talking to his phone, and he says, what I want you to do is create a scenario where you're an unhappy customer, and I'm your travel agent, and we're going to help me learn how to do a better job of it. And so, it starts talking to him, again, strictly voice, no typing anything, strictly voice. And it starts fussing about this and fussing about that. And he works to as much as he can, and finally it ends the conversation. And then he asks how it does. And he said, well, you could have been better here. And, and it was literally coaching him on how to be better at handling an unhappy customer. And again, you think about the ability for a team to have that kind of coaching in their hand. It makes a huge difference. I'm working on a project right now where it's one of the books I have in progress, and I'm using the book to train the AI to be able to work through a business process. And it's something I think I will eventually probably license and deliver as a product, but it's to go through some of the business planning processes that companies don't go through, but it's designed to be able to learn about their company, and to learn about where their company's located and what the company does, and then start to go through some of the, let's say, the tedious parts anyway, of trying to build out a plan. I use it right now to help me when I do that for a customer. I have a program, so I give it the company's name and location, and then I'll ask it, for example, are they in a floodplain? What are the risks nearby? All of those kinds of things, and it goes out, searches the information, and comes back with an answer. And it helps me create what they call a risk matrix, that shows the risk and the probability and the impact of any events happening, so that they can make plans to Okay, what are the things that are most likely, that are the most expensive, that are, that we need to put at the top of the list, and then it'll help them work through to both remediate, in other words, prevent the problem, and then how to deal with it afterwards. And again, these are things that I can do by myself, but it can do it in minutes where it would take me hours, which enables me then to handle more customers and do two things. It lowers the cost I would have to charge the end user, but it also increases my revenue in the process because I can take on more clients. So that's a good use case of where AI makes a difference. It's not really displacing anybody else. It's just enabling me to do so much more and much more quickly. And as it
boils down to the same thing, right? Like you have to be one step ahead. As long as the humans are one step ahead, they will be able to control their outcome much faster than the AI is evolving.
I would agree with that. And what I would suggest for any young person that is in secondary school, for example, or maybe even in the primary schools, I would start to learn and take, whatever AI you have available to you and start to learn and practice with it. Because again, that's a skill that will be in demand for the foreseeable future. Because I don't see them getting they'd have to be almost conscious, sentient, to be able to think through the process of programming them to do whatever you want them to do, because that is much more creative. Now, when we get to AGI, who knows what they'll be able to do? But right now, what they're able to do is think through. They're able to follow instructions really well. It might be a good way to describe it. You have to be able to give them the right instructions. This goes back to like programming computers. I can remember back in the old day when we programmed in Fortran and in BASIC. And I wrote a BASIC program that was about 600,000 lines of BASIC. And that was back before we had a structured BASIC. But it was running a business for my mom. And when I wrote a piece of it wrong, it didn't do what I wanted it to. And then I had to go into it and think about, okay, what's it doing? Why? And you just work your way through it. Well, it's the same thing with coding for AI, or for prompting, I should say is a better word for AI. Is what we do is we have to go ahead and think through the process. What is it we want? How can we describe it? And then once we get good at doing that, the future is pretty bright for people that understand that, for the foreseeable future. Now, people that learned COBOL like I did many, many years ago, there's not much demand for us today. But I kept moving forward as the computers evolved. I decided to stay up with it rather than say, "Oh no, I'm not going to change." And in life, change is so important, and the flexibility to change. Don't build yourself into this. In fact, I talk about businesses doing this. I'm gonna get off subject for just a minute, but too many businesses get in a rut. The reason they do things today is they used to do it that way, 10 years ago. And we've always done it that way. And I tell my managers that if somebody tells you they've always done it that way, that is not a good reason. That means you should test it and see if it's still the best way to do it. Companies that are successful are the companies that take risks, that try new things. Not everything works, but the ones that do work, if you're out in the front of it, you're going to hit a home run. And so it's the same thing for us as people. Is we can get in a rut where we just do what we've always done, and and then we get. I tell my students, I said, if you dig a rut deep enough and long enough, what you have is a grave. Because that could be the end of. You're just stuck there till you die. Same thing for companies. I'll give you an example of companies that didn't do that. You may have to edit a lot of this out. If you do, that's fine. But typewriter companies in the U.S., there were a lot of typewriter companies that had good, really well-paying contracts with schools and with the government to maintain their electric typewriters. And they made a good income. They were quite happy. They'd been doing it for years. And they missed a couple of things that happened. A couple of guys named Hewlett and Packard playing in a garage building laser printers. A company named Wang building word processing software. And another company named IBM deciding to build personal computers. But when those three things came together, what happened to typewriters? That typewriter business they had just disappeared. And it was because they were in this rut. They just looked one way.
I still have mine.
Huh?
I still have my typewriter.
Well, I mean, there are people that have typewriters. I haven't had a typewriter in decades, but in the U.S. in particular, there are not many typewriters left. It's a rarity. They're either throwaway typewriters, or they're something people have had for decades and just won't turn loose. Yeah, like a Selectric. Yeah, exactly. An IBM Selectric or something like that. It's not that they keep it as a collectible, but they have a use for it. Some people, instead of printing 3-part invoices, which all the modern printers are capable of doing, put one sheet of each color paper in different drawers, and you get a white copy, a yellow copy, a pink copy. And you just print it rather than have somebody else print it in triplicate NCR paper, and then you type on it to fill it out. But there are still some people that like the 3-part forms and they fill them out. It's okay, whatever you want to do. But again, all of these things combine to show the need to just be flexible and to In fact, my new podcast is going to be future-proofing Chronicles. It's going to be about future-proofing a company. And what future-proofing means is thinking about the future and what could happen. You'll never be able to know exactly what will happen, but you think about what could happen. And like I said, right now, what I see with AI is that's a good place to put your skills, to learn to develop it. At 70 plus years of age, I'm not going to go out and start really focusing on it. I use it. I get it to do what I need to do. But I'm not necessarily going to go sell my services to a company as their AI prompting guy. I could do that in most search, but there are too many things I don't know enough about the process. Because let's say you're going to teach it to do accounting. Okay, so you've got to understand enough about accounting to help explain it and make sure that you can look at the output, make sure it's right, and if it's not right, you can explain to the AI why it's wrong. So that means I'd have to learn accounting and coding before I could go do that. So I do what I know, but I use AI as a tool to do it. Does that make sense?
It does. I want to highlight something about the business side that you mentioned earlier. I've been a businessman and entrepreneur for almost a decade now. And I've been a business analyst as well. A lot of times, some companies hire me to analyze their business because they're trying to change the direction of the company, or maybe they're trying to bring in a new technology, or in terms of acquisitions. A lot of times, when acquisitions are happening, they invite me to analyze the business and try to give a business proposal of how they can actually move forward, or what can be done with the business if they acquire it. One thing that I've realized with a lot of new business owners who don't have experience, they want to spend money without realizing what change is needed. They have a vision, they have like an end goal, but they don't have a process of how they want to actually achieve that goal. They come with that, like, oh, I saw one of my friends directed me that this business is good, so I want to invest in this. And my goal is that in like 5 or 10 years, I want to reach this stage. I personally believe you should have a vague idea of the goal, but you cannot have like a strict goal that, okay, in 5 years, I want to do that without even knowing the business. Because you don't know the processes of it. You don't know what is lacking. You don't even know like how much investment it will take for you to reach from this point to that point. There are a lot of variables before you jump into the business, and sometimes when you acquire a business, there are a lot of variables that you didn't even predict it. For example, licensing, the manpower, maybe you don't even have the expertise, so you need to hire somebody to bring in people to work for you. So there are a lot of variables you don't understand, and that is where a lot of people's, which I personally believe, they're using AI in a wrong way. They will just use ChatGPT. Okay, I want to acquire this business. How do I achieve it? They're asking the wrong questions. What you talked about prompting, this is, I think, a very crucial point when using AI. What kind of a prompt you give AI to get the right answers? If you don't even know the right questions, you will never get the right answer because you haven't even asked the right question.
And that's exactly true. And just to I'm going to broaden that out a little bit. Is part of it is the situation you described where people that don't know what they don't know. And a lot of business owners are like that. They don't know what they don't know. And so they assume that they know all they need to know, and that's why they get stuck in a tunnel. Because I go back to some of the typewriters, some people that were in the typewriter industry when those things happened, guess what they do now? They sell copiers and printers. Because they saw, they were looking down the road first of all. Too many businesses drive their, like they're looking at this right here. They're not looking at what's going to happen in the future. They don't think about it. That's, again, it goes back to my future proofing thing. So you have to think about, okay, take what I know, and look at what's happening around me. I'll give you an example from the copier industry because I got a lot of expertise there. Is a lot of dealers are selling, or not analog, but they're selling toner-based devices. And the factories in Japan build toner-based devices. And they push the companies to sell toner-based devices. But toner-based devices are the least economical. They're least environmentally friendly, and so those are technologies that are fading. They're most maintenance intensive. They take a lot of work. And about 5 years ago, I saw an Epson 100-page a minute copier, and it's ink based. And in a million copies, all you have to do is change the feed tires, and the key operator can do that. Okay. So how do you get a penny a click or a penny and a half a click for making copies on something that doesn't require any maintenance? All you do is put toner or put, ink in it. And so many of the dealers that I talk to today still don't see that as a threat. I have one dealer that I know, and he's fairly astute, and he's starting to put a lot of them out. And not just Epson's, but Riso makes some, and like for printing utility bills, things like that. They're very quick, very inexpensive. They're very reliable. And so, but you have to be looking down the road. A business plan is not about, I want to make more next year than I made this year. So we're going to just sell more. Where are you going to sell it? And how much of it is going to be net new? Because you can sell more to your existing clients, and that's okay. But eventually all you're doing is just churning equipment through the clients. Your business isn't growing because you still have the same number of clicks being made, or probably even fewer clicks being made, because that's the trend in print volume. So you have to think about these things. What's going to change in my environment? What's going to happen with the government? What's going to happen with the environment? Where are prices going to go up and down? And so it doesn't matter what you're thinking about. You have to understand the questions to ask. Again, I go back to, it's about asking the right questions to think clearly. Yeah. But you can't just assume that because it works today, it's going to work tomorrow. Lots
also,
of
I feel like the misconception about AI, which a lot of general public have, I don't want to just simply say business owners have, a lot of general public have, is that if you work in AI, then you're a programmer, which I feel is not true. There are a lot of people who are working in AI, but they are users. They use the tools. So you don't need to be a programmer to work in AI industry. You just need to know the tools. You need to know how to use those tools. And that is something that you don't need a 4-year degree or a 6 months course to do. You can just simply go to Udemy and you can start learning basic concepts. You can start learning how to use specific tools, even depending on your need. A lot of small businesses use AI and they don't even know that they're using AI.
Yeah, because somebody built a tool and sold them the tool that used the AI.
Yeah.
I think one of the things about, again, I love this conversation. One of the things about prompting AI is just being curious, and saying, well, what happens if I do this? What if I ask it this question? Did I get what I thought? If I didn't, why didn't I? How could I ask the question? It's like, let's say I'll go back to make it even easier to understand. Let's say you're using one of the programs that generates art. Okay, now I told it to do this and it did sort of that, but it's not right. Well, what is wrong with it? How can I explain to the AI what you wanted that's different than the way you explained it the first time? And all you have to do is have like ChatGPT with DALL-E, and you can learn to do that yourself right now today. It's just about taking the time to learn what happens when you do something, and how you ask the question. And you can prompt on things that are simple to get the concept. In other words, so you could ask it a fairly simple question. If it doesn't come out with the answer you want, think about how you could ask that question differently. It's a lot like teaching, I'd say it's a lot like teaching a child, because you ask your child a question and it doesn't give you the answer you want. Then you just have to ask it don't give it the answer, just ask it the question a different way. And so you keep asking it until you find out how to ask it the question to get the answer you want. And then you started to improve your prompting skills. I mean, that's how I've learned. I haven't taken a course on any of it. Actually, I don't even study it. I just get it and I start using it. Because at least for me, my way of learning, that's the best way. Just give me something, I'll poke at it and prod at it. When I had my dealership, I bought a software package. It was a complete ERP enterprise reporting system. Did billing and did client monitor, all that stuff. I had to I had to get a Unix device for it to run on, and they wanted like $20,000 to come install it for me. I said, send me the software. I put it in, I installed it, I got it to work. Now, the first time I did it, I didn't categorize things as well as I could have. It worked, and I was able to get accurate data in and out of it and do billing and all the things I wanted it to. Then I sold my company, and I went to another company, installed it for them, and it was much better. Then I left that company, went to another company, and installed it for them, and it was really good. But I didn't study it. I just learned from my mistakes. And that's the nice thing about with AI. If you're just prompting it on your desktop, there's nothing you can do that's going to hurt anything. You can't break the AI. You can't let AI is not going to break your computer. So just play with it, see what it does, see how it happens, and be curious.
I have a question for you. What's your favorite device that you have used so far, a computer device, throughout the history? And what was your first one?
Okay, so that's interesting. My first one was the Heathkit H89. It was the first dual processor, small. It ran on Z80 chips, which was comparable to the Intel 8080, which was basically Intel's very first microprocessor that went into PCs. But it had two of them. One did graphics and one did main computing. But to put it in perspective, we'll talk about it for a minute. So I'm dealing in US dollars. To buy that back then was about $3,000. Now, I took it as part of a course that the government paid for. So I built it as I went. And I'm talking about soldering in the memory chips and soldering the connections, that kind of build. It came with 8K of RAM. I said 8K, not 8 meg, not 8 gig, 8K of RAM. I added another K to get to 64, which was the most you could pack in it. And I paid $600 for that 48K of RAM. Okay? But at 8K of RAM, I could run word processing software on it, and it worked fine. Nowadays, you can't load the BIOS in 8K, because everything just expands. As memory gets cheaper, programs get more bloated. They add more fun. Actually, I don't want to say bloated. They just add more features, and it takes more programming to do it, more code. But the end result of all of this is that it gets better. But my favorite for fun, I like my first one because I did a lot of cool stuff. I was building a flight simulator. I was working on F-15s at the time in the Air Force, and so I talked to pilots about figuring out the drag coefficient and stuff. And I was working on figuring out, okay, so what's the math involved in trying to figure out how much thrust do I need to get it to accelerate and these kinds of things. And what happens if you pull back? I didn't have a yoke, but I'd use the mouse as my. And so and again, it was just a learning exercise for me. I wasn't going to sell it.
Imagine the technology that you had back then, and you're trying to build an F-15 with it.
Yeah, well, I'm building a simulator with it, but yeah, it was.
Yeah,
it was. But the thing is programming's always been one of the things in this kind of thing. I guess I love the problem solving. Because it was funny, I'd just been married a year or so at the time, and my wife would be getting ready to go to bed, and I'd be working on my programming, and she says, "Are you going to come to bed?" And I said, "I'll be there in a few minutes." And the next time I'm aware of any time, it's like 3:00 in the morning, and I don't have any awareness of time has passed because I've been in my head thinking about what it's doing and what it's supposed to do, trying to figure out where I made the mistake. But I guess you could say it's just a puzzle solving thing. My favorite computer to play with was I had I actually still have it. It is it's not Atari. It was I forget the name right off the top of my head, but it was there was one that was really good for gaming and really good for graphics. That was a competitor to Apple it was more of a competitor to Apple than it was to Microsoft. But it was only out for a couple of years, and then that kind of went away. And then they created a games console
Saga
out of the
Saga? SAGA.
No, it wasn't Saga. Hold on.
Sure.
Let me ask AI. First chat. I tell you what, I don't know if do you use Perplexity?
I used it a couple of times, but I don't use it quite often.
That's my default anymore.
My first computer was 313, 24 megabits of hard drive.
Well, we didn't have hard drives when I came on board. It was, you had the big 8.5-inch floppies.
It was a laptop which was my father's, and then we assumed that it was ours. It wasn't ours, it was my father's for him to work on. But we assumed that this was our first laptop. It had Microsoft Word, and that computer only had one game on it, Snake, and we used to enjoy it, and Solitaire. Those are the two games on it.
The Amiga.
Amiga.
Yeah, the Amiga 500. Then it went to 1000, and it had better graphics and multimedia than the Atari or the Apple II at that point in time. And see how long it took Perplexity to find that. But again, it is all about using the tool. Perplexity. What I like about Perplexity is it doesn't give you listicles. Because if you Google something, you get a list of lists. So the top 20 games, and you click in there, and then it's another list of companies that sort out the top 20 games, and you got ads. With Perplexity, I ask it what the top 20 games. It gives me a list of 20 games, so that makes
Specific,
it from a
precise.
search engine. Yeah, it's just much easier. I
was saying, let's change the tone of the conversation before we end. I was having a conversation with one of my colleagues, and he had a very interesting opinion. He said, for any evolutionary leap, there needs to be chaos. So if you see our history, Industrial Revolution, there was chaos. And then AI, the leap that it has gone through, it's probably COVID. And now there is a revolutionary war going on. Like you can say like a Cold War going on between East and West. So there is a lot of AI development going on between DeepSeek and ChatGPT, and then, like to and fro. So what is your opinion on that?
Well, I think that governments always take whatever tools are available to them, and they use them in ways that they weren't maybe even originally intended to. They learn to weaponize things. We think about all the research in how to cure diseases, and both both sides have found ways to weaponize the diseases that they're teaching, they're learning to cure. I think that's just a proof that mankind can't do this on their own. They just don't have the skill set. But so whatever gets invented is going to be turned into a weapon at some point in time. And warfare no longer exist necessarily, or is not solely relegated to guns and things, because we think about the cyber wars that are going on, constantly. Both sides trying to attack the other side. It's still warfare, but it's also almost a little bit like a computer gaming. Some people hack because it's fun. So you have a little bit of that going on. Yeah, it's a challenge. And so I think that in some cases it's like that. It's a challenge, and let's see what we can do to the other guys. And, but it exists in the economic sphere as well. We're going to put in embargoes. We're going to do this, or we're going to do that. It's just the way man is. When we you talk about chaos, I'm going to go back to that for a minute, because every time something new, you're right, every time something changes drastically, it creates some chaos for a while. But in most cases, what comes out of the chaos is better than what existed before the chaos. I give you another good example. Let's go back to when computers came into existence. And there were all these people that were like great mathematicians using slide rules and the old hand calculators and all of this stuff. And then it became the programmers that learned how to program the problems into Fortran or COBOL, some of the very early languages, that made it spit out those answers that the mathematicians were spending months figuring out in minutes. So that disrupted it. So what that meant is those mathematicians had to learn to use a new tool. And that goes back to, early in the discussion. It's the people that get displaced need to learn to use the new tool. You can sit in a corner and get mad because that displaced you. That's not going to make you that's not productive. The productive thing to do is learn to use the tool. And, and the better because if you had a set of knowledge, you know how to do something, and somebody invents a tool that will do it better than you do it, well, you know more than the guy that invented the software as much as he did. So learn how to use the tool. And now you're leveraged. You can do more. And as far as the governments, I try to stay out of politics. That's not my area that I want to get into, but it is, it's obviously one of the things that's going to be weaponized.
Yeah. Already is.
Yeah, exactly.
It has been weaponized for a very long time for any country. It's just that what I was looking at it is perspective of social norm. Like, because it has been so drastically used, I personally feel like, okay, for example, like when you were working on 15 and F-16, the technologies that you used back then probably people in their social life used a few years after you have already used it, abused it, and scrapped it and created a new thing.
Well,
Yeah.
actually, it's interesting because I'll give you one example. The fighters in that time started having heads-up displays, and about 15 years ago, I thought, man, you could do that in a car. And I just saw, I think it's the new Kia, maybe new Hyundai, but anyway, one of the new models, the 25 models, literally has a heads-up display. It shows your speed, shows your fuel, all the things that are on your instrument panel are now up, and your GPS are all up in the windscreen. So you don't ever have to look down. You can just look out your window and you can see anything. So that was a logical evolution and a civilian use of a technology that was originally invented by the military. They had to wait till the pricing came down to make it, I think, viable. So that's what we see is we see the things that were used, things that were developed for the space program, for example, now are things we use every day, super glue and just so many things. Here's a scary thing is if you have a smartwatch, your smartwatch has more capabilities than all the computers NASA had when they sent a man into orbit. Than all of NASA's.
Yeah.
Again, back then it was people in the back room with slide.
Well, that's a conspiracy itself.
Yeah.
So,
One of the guys one of the astronauts, I forget who it was, said it. They asked him how I felt, about going to, into space. And he says, well, how would you feel about sitting on top of a Roman candle built by the lowest bidder? The guy that was cheapest, I get it. It's so things that a lot of things that the military develops first come out. We'll see them used by civilians. It's unusual to things develop on the civilian side just because the military typically has so much more budget, and they can hire the brightest and the best. But AI is one of those things that really came out, I think, at the same time to everybody. ChatGPT, or I should say OpenAI, was the one that really started putting it out there and doing it in a framework that everybody had access to it, which is very transformational because they were doing it for free to start with. And it's very inexpensive. I have a paid subscription so that I have things like the 03 model. In fact, today I'm going to test that out a little bit, see how well it reasons. But here's an interesting thing for the people who are interested in AI too. So one of the things you can do is you can teach AI to write scripts, or prompts for itself because it knows about itself. It's not like it's self-aware, but it understands what its capabilities are. And one of the projects I was working on, I said, think about the process necessary to create this, and then in steps create a script that I can use with OpenAI or with ChatGPT to create a custom GPT that will always do this. And we went through a couple of iterations of it, and then I had a custom GPT that serves one specific function that instead of me having to think all the way through it, I learned to use the tool. It's always about leveraging technology. And now I have something that's custom programmed to do something for me. And it saved me probably hours of program or prompting time to get it right. And it's just leveraging. I'll share an interesting quote with you that I learned when I was first starting my business, because I started in the copier industry by owning a copier dealership. And that was probably almost 40 years ago now. That's how long ago it was. And I read this quote and it just stuck with me. And I think it's so interesting because in the times past, they defined the wealth of a country by the resources it had. So a country that had lots of gold and lots of minerals was a very rich country. A country that didn't have those, and this applies to companies as well. But in this case, it was talking about for a country, they were poor. But after World War II, that conversation changed because the new definition was that you leverage the wealth a country has by the technology they use to define their real wealth. And a case in point is Japan after the war. Because after World War II, Japan was very poor as far as natural resources. It didn't have a lot of money. It didn't have a lot of anything. But it learned to develop technology. And pretty soon, they were the leading camera manufacturer, and it went from cameras to all kinds of things to cars. But it was always about leveraging the technology, and now they're a global economic powerhouse. because they leverage technology. So for a company or for us as individuals, the way we can leverage the technology we have access to is going to define in some extent the wealth we have, the prosperity we have.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Ken. I mean, it's a really interesting conversation going on. But I'm afraid like we have passed 50 minutes. And I feel like if I don't cut it short, we will talk for hours.
We could talk for hours. Yes. I like to talk and I like to think about stuff. It's, again,
Yeah.
I'm
We
curious.
definitely need to do another episode, and I'm sure like I will invite you for a different conversations on similar topics. And I really enjoy the conversation. If you have any last words before we end the conversation, if you have some advice for the new generation coming in, especially because you have such a vast experience, I'm sure like there's a lot of things we can learn from you. If you can just summarize in like one sentence something that people should be looking forward for when it comes to artificial intelligence and technology in general, how would you say?
I would say look at it as something that's positive in the long run and be curious. I mean, so much, everything that's ever been invented was probably invented by a curious person. So be curious. How do I do this? How can I do it? You think with questions like that. If your mind generates questions, and then you'll find answers to them, you will become much smarter. You'll be much more adapted to the world around you, and you have a much better prospects for succeeding. And it's that way with AI. Just get curious with it, ask it questions, play with it, see what you can do. I'll give you one last example of something that was really interesting. And this again goes back 2.5 years when this other gentleman and I were doing our podcast. We decided to have it write a poem, and so it did. And then we start telling it to write it in like Robin Williams' voice or write it in, Rodney Dangerfield's voice. And it was amazing how effective it was. It came out with stuff that sounded like what they would write. And we just got curious. We're like, what happens if? What happens if? Because with AI, you can't hurt anything. So be curious.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Ken. I really appreciate it. And it was a lovely conversation with you. Until next time, have a good day.
Okay, you too. Thanks. It was fun.